Okay, it's Dr. Manny. Welcome to Asylum. Gonna try that again. Thanks Christine for letting me know that you guys couldn't hear me, and hopefully, those of you who joined me last time hop back in since we were having some sound issues last time. Okay, so basically, overwhelmed is an emotional state. It's a state of mind. Okay, um, that means, and just a little geekery to kind of help it make sense, to make everything help everything else make sense. Uh, hey, Alicia. Hey, Layla. Thanks for joining. Okay, so to begin with, overwhelmed is a state of mind, and that's not to insult anyone who has had the misfortune. And to me, it's at least a daily occurrence because I like to stack on interesting things and challenges. So, well, I guess I should say, you guys can hear me now? Awesome. Thanks, Christine. Okay, so it's a state of mind, it's a way of being. It has a feeling. But what's most important about a state of mind is not how it feels, but what it limits your access to. As far as our memories are state based. You know, um, we all know, hey, Roy, thanks for dropping by. Layla, I see the wave. So when you're in one state of mind, you can't access the memories associated with another state of mind. Okay? Now, if you've ever been super mad at someone, try in the midst of that super madness to remember how much you love that person, or try to remember a super funny joke they've told you at one point in time. That's just not how the way our brains work. So, the core idea is that all of the stuff that you read about being overwhelmed, all these cute little tips, all these strategies, tools, and advice that you come across, when you go amygdala hijack, that stuff is useless. The only stuff that works when you're in that state, in that overwhelmed, paralyzed, negative self-talk, frozen, feeling as if everything under the sun is on on your plate and on your back right then and there, is to disconnect from all of that stuff revving in your mind. Okay? And the reason is that usually when you're overwhelmed, it means that you've accumulated all these, and I imagine them as a sort of microaggression, an emotional microaggression. Okay? So you've got one thing that's kind of stressing you. Possibly you woke up in the morning and you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, to use that euphemism. So your energy is not super high. Okay? Along the way, you had, you rushed through breakfast and it set your mood off in a particular way. So you still have some aspect of that that took some of your energy, shifted the way you're feeling. You're not at a peak performance state. You don't have all of your energy in your system. Okay? Along the way, you have the standard habits that are taking up energy in the background. Some of the ones that have a little bit of emotion in them, because most of us, some of our habits, we have emotional baggage that goes with a lot of our habits. We'll do it, but we don't feel thrilled about it. You get to work and you go into your work persona, and so that adds a little bit of stress in itself. So here you are in this state, and someone introduces a new element, something that knocks you off kilter because energetically you just don't have it. And not only do you not have that energy free to just all out take on that task, but in the state where they caught you, Elaine, how are you? In the state that they caught you, you don't have the energy available to choose which of all the different scripts you have running in your mind, all the stories that are running right then and there. You don't have the energy to choose which ones of those. Hey, Connie, thanks for dropping by. You don't have the energy to choose which ones of those to let go, to make space in your mind to turn your attention fully to whatever the new piece is coming in, to evaluate it, to see how important it is, to see how it relates to all the other stuff in your mind, in order to slot it in, to prioritize it, to emotionally attach to it. So what you end up with in overwhelmed state is this one big ball of awful. It's just all this stuff to do, and can't figure out which one to start on to make headway, or you got one you're working on, you can't figure out, hey Jeff, thanks for dropping by. You can't figure out how to switch lanes. Hey Dr. V, thanks for dropping by. And so you end up in this frustrated, non-productive state. And what happens after a while is, as the morale drops, you get to where, yep, definitely, there's an element of perfectionism to it too, Dr. V, thanks. Yep. So you get to the point where you have all these different processes running, and you no longer have what's the executive functioning to step through and sort of think about each of the individual processes that are running in the background in your mind. It just becomes a cluster of noise. Okay? Now, what makes it worse is that in that moment, when you go into a bit of a fight, flight, freeze, faint, where you no longer, your emotional reaction becomes so disproportionate to the individual activities and even to the new activity that you can't get in a state of mind to pick one thing out of the list of things you have to do, because it doesn't even feel like a list. It just feels like a pile of crap at that point. You can't pick each individual item and make a good decision, a priority choice in the moment, like here and now. Okay? So by the way I described that, you guys already know I'm heading towards the standard approach, over-inclusive thinking. Yep, that's what it is, Jeff. And so, by the way I'm framing this, you guys can tell that I'm heading in the same general direction, because overwhelm has the same sort of solution as most other things that exist in our minds. It's a matter of returning to center, and it's easier said than done, because what you're going to feel when you decide to return to center and is this dreadful feeling as if you're going, one of the things or two of the things are going to fall if for a split second you stop thinking about all of them. That's what it feels like emotionally. It's like there's something that I'm not doing. There's something that I'm forgetting to do. There's one of these things. None of these things can be put on the back burner, and I need to take on this next thing. Okay? So first step is going to be to return to center. Now, what you have to tell yourself, hey, Nichelle, thanks for joining. What you have to tell yourself in that moment is here and now for the next 4 or 5 minutes, or bump it for the next 30 seconds. If I stop thinking about everything but my breathing, will everything fall apart? And the answer is no, in most cases. I'm going to say in most cases, because there's always going to be some exception that someone could come up with. So the reason you're letting go of all the things for that moment is that the way our minds work, when you let something go, and if you let it go without a negative emotion, if you let it go with a neutral emotion, just saying to yourself in an intentional way, I'm going to focus all my attention right now on my breathing for 3 minutes. Set a timer so that you're not thinking about the time. You want to be thinking about one thing. And you pull your energy towards, and your attention, your energy through focusing your attention is what it really comes down to. You narrow your consciousness to your breath. And hey Trish, thanks for coming back. I saw you had come in earlier and we had some sound issues, so I appreciate you dropping back. There's that semantic aspect, Dr. V, definitely. So that's actually what I'm going to talk about right now. So as you turn your attention to the present moment and release those other elements for this microsecond to begin with, the emptiness is not super pleasant, because most of us, that's when the worry kicks in and the stories get louder in your mind when you try to disconnect from them. And if you can imagine that now you have this soup of stories. You have the stories from the morning. You have the stories from work. You have the stories from the drive-in. You have the stories your mind is running because you're too far from lunch. You have the story about something you have to do this afternoon, a conversation you don't feel like having. All those stories are running all at once. So until you tune in to the one singular signal, and what they found to be most effective is to tune into your body signals, your breathing, your heartbeat. If you're not the kind of person who listening to your heartbeat when you're worried makes you neurotic, you got to watch for that. Because a lot of people, if you tune into your heartbeat, then you be like, holy crap, my heart's beating fast. I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm truly overwhelmed. And then you spiral into panic. Don't put that on me. Okay? So the power of the breathing is that you focus on the breathing and you focus on somewhere on your body where you can see the breathing happening. Whether it's what they found to be particularly powerful is to focus so much that you can feel it, the coolness of the air coming in and out of your lungs and in and out of your nostrils and blowing up against your lip. Now, another aspect is, and this is, guys, this is cognitive loading. This is forcing yourself, pulling yourself onto another thought by filling your mind up with something that doesn't have a meaning that you could automatically make catastrophic. The world's not going to end if you make a mistake in this breathing exercise. And the world's not going to end, hopefully, that's not what your job is. The world's not going to end if you take 5 minutes to recenter. Okay? Now, well, yeah, different people have different responses to it. Like Chris says, like I've mentioned, it's some people, you have to see which one works for you. Other people, that's why those spinny things do so well, because it allows you to turn some of your energy towards the little spinny thing as opposed to every other thing going on in your life. So now, that's the first step. The first step is always going to be returning to center, because you want to let go of those other stories running in your mind, those beliefs, those things that have been triggered and have kind of stacked up all day and been running in the background that you haven't been paying attention to. You'll notice certain ones will become louder and protest when they realize that you're turning your attention away from them. And I like to personify and anthropomorphize thoughts because it makes it easier to imagine them. So imagine your thoughts were personalities. Their feelings are going to be hurt when you're turning attention from them, when you're neglecting them. Okay? So that's the first aspect, return to center. Second aspect is what you'll always hear people say, return to your bigger purpose, look at the bigger picture, look at your why. Now, you can't do that as long as your amygdala is firing off. That's why you want to return to that breathing. You want to calm down. You want to create what's called a parasympathetic state. Now, and this is in whatever stress you have, whatever overwhelm you have in the moment, these are the solutions. Anytime you do anything else and say you're going to do these steps later, you're reinforcing the habit of doing it the wrong way. And therefore, when you do start doing it later, when you do go in and start to put in a habit, behavioral, and attitude mental framework, it's going to be that much harder, because every minute that you're thinking a certain way reinforces that way of thinking years and years. Okay, so clear your palate with returning to center. I always say that because that's what works. Second step, call up your values. You call up your values by either a bigger vision of a future vision of where things are as you want them to be. And now that runs the risk of escapism, where a lot of folks do that part right, where they hop into the bigger vision and they never come the hell back until they are overwhelmed again by new stuff. Don't do that. The purpose of the bigger vision is to put the things around you in perspective. Okay? So if the overwhelm is a result of something that startled you and is super urgent, then returning to the bigger vision allows you to pull up the stories and pull together the pieces of what are the things that are most relevant to you that, say, at the end of this hour you want done, at the end of this day you want done, at the end of this week you want done. It's the pieces that are part of your core self-narrative, the parts that you will feel badly about if you don't do them, the parts that are part of your identity. Okay, so you start making those choices during overwhelm, because overwhelm is what's called a teachable moment. It's an aversive state. You don't want to be there. So your brain is going to hop up and out of there into a new state, into a new way of thinking, into a new activity. So your goal is to find a simple activity that honors your values to pop up and do simply. Low energy. It shouldn't be something that you dread doing that takes a lot of setup. You know, whether it's twiddling your thumbs or whistling a song or going online and finding one joke from some joke website, whether it's a quick yoga, a few quick burpees. It's called a pattern interrupt if you're into the hypnosis stuff. It's a pattern interrupt, because all those All those stories, you need to return to center, and then you need to go somewhere else so that the stories don't immediately make their way back in. You're choosing a filter through which to choose those stories. Okay? So again, return to center, part one. Part two, tune into your values, which essentially means pulling up a vision of stuff that you like, a story that you enjoy, a piece of music, a piece of exercise, something that you tell yourself needs to get done, but you manage to never find the time to do it, even though it's super simple. Go fold some laundry. I happen to be one that I find meditation in dishes. I'm like, I'm going to do these dishes with Pandora. Okay? Now, shifting that channel allows you to pull different mental models into your mind. And when you do that, inevitably, when you go back to pull up those other models, when those other models pop into your mind, those other priorities, those other things waiting to be done, if you observe them coming in, you'll notice that they come in one at a time, sometimes two or three at a time, I'll be honest. And then if they come in several at a time, that means you noticed more than one at a time. It means that this is an opportunity to practice noticing when things are coming into your mind and how they're affecting you emotionally. Okay? When you wake up in the morning, as you're pressing snooze, are you going into a worse mood each time? 3 snoozes in, are you grumpier? Dr. Reese says, yeah, people leave you alone when you wash the dishes. It's amazing peace and quiet. And so the practice becomes recognizing when thoughts enter your mind, giving the thoughts a little bit of attention, looking at that thought and what it says in a clear type of way. A lot of times a thought comes to mind and we immediately respond, we react, it spikes us, it triggers us. We go into a mood because, here comes that person who always pisses me off. Or here comes that email from this person reminding me of a bill that I can't afford to pay. Or here's a reminder of something that I have to do that I don't feel like doing. Look at the trigger, the signal that comes in. Look at how it affects you emotionally. Be aware of that emotion. And then distance yourself from that emotion before it takes you down the road of there's this soup of emotions that we fall into where we forget what we're mad about. We forget what got us in that zone. And then we pour it on everything else we happen to be thinking about at the time, which, as I'm pointing out, as I mentioned earlier, is kind of toxic because throughout the day, just human nature, we open these loops. We start thinking about something. We never get done thinking about it. So we're kind of thinking about it in the background. We call ourselves multitasking. So that loop is still open. And then another loop opens. In traffic, someone says something. Something comes on the radio that gets your attention. So all of these additional emotional layers get put on whatever loops you have open, because that loop assumes, you get to the point where in the morning, when you're waking up and your alarm goes off, you already start thinking about all the negative aspects. I like that. Don't stew in the emotional soup. Thanks, Dr. V. You start thinking about all the emotional aspects of the day that usually piss you off. You start setting yourself up with those expectations to be triggered because now you're super primed to notice those triggers in your day because of the stories you're telling yourself about them. Okay? So at the moment of overwhelm is your chance to unhook from all of those stories running in your mind. And this, again, takes practice because you get this guilt. You're like, well, I'm not worrying enough to get stuff done. Oh, you got a whole crew listening. Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. So you end up with this stack of things, all of which are tipping you off into that zone just a little bit. And then another one, just a little bit more, and it's all accumulated. So you're not really 100% sure which element is triggering you. So you give all of them credit for triggering you. And in the morning, you wake up, your alarm goes off, you go into the bad mood. You hop in the car in traffic, it triggers you into another bad mood because you remember it was part of the kit that ended up in the bad mood. You literally work yourself up into this bad mood as a result of all these different things that you keep open in your mind just in time to get to the bad mood, and then all of them get the power. You give all of them the power to trigger you into that bad mood. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense, because I'm visualizing it, but often when I'm seeing something, the choice of words I feel is somewhat limited. I'm a nonlinear thinker, a little bit. So essentially, we talked about step one, step two, step three was pulling up the values. Now, when you pull up the vision, what emerges in your mind is a set of values. Those set of values allow you to then turn around and filter all goals that are coming at you in the moment and prioritize them in accordance with how they rank among what's already running in your mind, and in terms of their own values, how they honor your values. And this is, you'll often hear, I think in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, they mention this. This is the difference between urgent and important. Something is important if when you pop up in your mind those values and that vision, you turn back to that something, and suddenly your brain is like, bingo, this is the thing I was waiting for. Don't miss this opportunity. Snatch that, add that to, is it means? Yeah, means and ways. So I'm thinking about the strategic thinking course I took. So the means and the ways. This is one of the means. It's one of the tools you need to get there, to perform the ways. So this is where you open yourself up to serendipity, because you're able to, you have in your mind already a bit of a framework in place, so that when something startles you, the first thing you do is notice the emotions towards it. Why did it make you angry? Why did it make you scared? Is it threatening? Is it overwhelming? But you're turning your attention to that one new item. That means letting go of those other items. Okay? Now, again, the best way to let go and to put on your filters is to pull off into that breathing space. And when you practice the breathing, you get to the point where a couple short breaths in your brain is like, okay, yeah, I get it. You want me to calm on down. So you do. Step two, you turn your attention to what you value. Your story, your vision, the thing that ignites you and puts you in that good mood. So then you turn towards whatever is facing you now and look at how it fits into the vision or doesn't. Okay? Now, what happens when you turn to your vision is you shift states of mind. Each state of mind has perspectives. It has values. It has priorities. This is how we store our memories. When you're in a parenting state of mind, you're in a certain way. If you take your work state of mind home and you forget to switch out of your employee state of mind or entrepreneur state of mind into mom and dad state of mind, you're less attentive to the signals in the environment. You're possibly less affectionate, possibly preoccupied, and you're not there. Okay? So when you turn to your state of mind of your highest values, this is Barbara Fredrickson. She does some positive psychology. She calls it the broaden and build approach. Once you shift into that positive state of mind, then you're more intentional. You're thinking about you. You're returning to your core. Any activity you do from there on, any choice you make from there on is meaningful. If you choose to say no to someone, you ain't worried about them surprising you with a why not, because you know your reasons. And it gets to the point where after a while, you start developing relationships based on people who know what you want to accomplish effectively enough so that, Christine says, I frame letting go with creating space for creative, positive energy to flow. Exactly. You're creating that space because your memory can only hold 4 plus or minus 2 things at a time. That's what your consciousness can hold. 4 pieces of info. Okay? So, let's see. So you retrieve the info, you retrieve your values, you turn to the item, and you decide where that item is in your priorities. Now, here's what's important. The first reaction people have when you look at where that item is in your priorities and how it fits into your goals, a lot of times we'll be like, well, I don't know where it fits into my list of goals. I don't know where it prioritizes compared to all the other things I'm thinking about. Guess what? It's time to cleanse that palette, and eliminate everything else to see what else comes up. And then start labeling those with priorities. Start guarding your mental space. Because if you have a bunch of stuff in your head and it's just full and you can't figure out where this new thing comes in, then it's time to start doing the presencing thing. I'm here. I'm now. What are the opportunities available to move my bigger vision, my dreams, my goals forward here and now? What are the things that are within my control? What are the things that are outside of control? Christine says it varies with gender. I don't know. I don't have the data for it. You know me and data. If I don't know, I'll be like, So, let's see. From there, what happens is if you're in the habit of saying, yeah, I'm going to tighten up my mental framework later, well, you're just throwing more stuff in, more stuff. You're tightening up that habit. You're practicing and rehearsing the habit of when new things come into mind, reacting to them emotionally as expectations, as surprises, as threats, as opposed to turning them into opportunities. Something is only an opportunity if it's meaningful and if it has value within the context of what you want to accomplish in your larger narrative. Okay? And that includes relationships. You'll get to the point where when you return to your values, you'll be like, why is this person even around me anymore? What am I doing? What do I see in my future with them in it? And this is where a technique called the deathbed meditation comes to mind. Okay, the deathbed meditation works like this. It solves overwhelm pretty quickly. This is for people who are like, well, I don't know what my purpose, values, and long term, etc. are. Imagine that you are in a hospital room, big hospital room, enough to fit all your closest friends. You are on your deathbed. It is your last day, last few minutes to hours, and you've lived a full life. So based off that, now you have certain people in the room with you. Who is in that room with you and why? What journey have you guys taken together that resulted in, on your deathbed, them being there with you? How have you impacted them? What reciprocal nurturing has taken place over the course of that relationship such that they are there at your deathbed and you're feeling satisfied with the integrity of that relationship as you pass over? Okay? So that's deathbed meditation. You use it to store your memories and your vision as to what steps should I have taken, who should I had with me. Dr. Reese says hospital room might be the size of a broom closet. Yeah, no, that's why I said an expansive one to fit all the friends in there. You got to bring in all the folks, Chris. Yeah, bring them in, Dr. V. So when you do the deathbed meditation from time to time, most people, here's the thing, most people, when they think about death, they go into a negative state, and as such, they don't take the power, the opportunity to take the power and flip it into the positive, the truth of it. The truth of it is, at some point, you will come to your is it twilight? Like, as you're heading towards death? The dusk of your life. There's going to be some lights out in the future at some point. And increasingly, as you step into that space mindfully, as you get beyond the sadness of that, you develop this deep richness in everything you do in life. Every moment you stay more present. Yeah. And the beauty of this is the sooner you start thinking of it that way, the sooner it loses that icky feeling. It loses that, you move to a point where you intend for people to honor your life as opposed to mourn your passing. Okay? So sort of an abstract idea, but that's where you find your purpose pretty effectively with that visualization. Okay? What are the things you value? Who are the people you value? Now, in the context of overwhelm usually happens in social situations because it's usually information, expectations, fear of loss of love, fear of loss of acceptance, fear of losing face, losing social status. Those are the things that when those stories get triggered by the presence of someone or by the way in which your feedback from the person is being interpreted by you. So it becomes a communication thing. Okay. So to kind of shift back to what I was saying earlier, when a person shows up and they're adding to the overwhelm, the question becomes, all right, what are the dynamics in this relationship? What is the communication pattern? What unmet need does this person have that when they approach me with, hey, Jenna, thanks for dropping back by. We had some technical difficulty earlier, so I restarted it when I realized that people weren't able to hear. So what specific need is that person coming to you with that they are being ineffective at communicating, and as such, it's coming across either as a surface aggressiveness or a passive aggressiveness, or they're communicating in such a way that you sense an ulterior motive. That's one form of overwhelm triggered by a person. Second form of overwhelm triggered in an interpersonal dynamic is when Either the person, the way in which they provide the feedback, or the way you receive, in which you receive the feedback, is non-nutritious to your end goal. Okay? So useful feedback is what's called descriptive feedback as opposed to evaluative feedback. If you and I are working on something together, when you come with your feedback, I don't need you shaming me, guilting me. I don't need you hurting my feelings. I don't need you distracting me. I need you telling me, based on what you know to be my vision, if we're on the same team, what you know is the shared vision, I need you talking to me to help me, A, clarify what's in my mind, B, clarify the difference in perspective in your mind, the solution that you see, that you're guiding me towards, and specific descriptions of that delta. Manny, you're using your left hand and you should be using your right hand. Manny, we're driving 50 and we should be driving 45. That evaluative feedback includes the person's values embedded in it, and they're usually most noticeable because they're values that are not specifically aligned to your values, either at a higher level, who you are, the principles by which you operate, or they are not context relevant, such that the person steps into the frame where you're already feeling overwhelmed, or you're in your zone and they come in and imposing a different measurement system. Hi Keisha, how are you? So what we're looking at is a system of how does the overwhelm get tipped over? How do we get tipped into that overwhelm? Because the reality of it is that when you're dealing with someone who gives evaluative feedback, whether it's praise, because even praise that doesn't have next action steps in it doesn't move your goal forward. What it does is it distracts you into that state where you start feeling yourself, patting yourself on the back off the compliment, and whoops, you've fallen a little bit behind. Plus, you were already a little bit overwhelmed to begin with. Okay? So your goal on the delivery of feedback, you want to be receiving feedback. To get out of overwhelm, your goal is to find someone who is aligned with your values, someone who understands your vision, not someone who you're trying to prove yourself right to, or someone who's kind of cruel and critical. Okay? You want to express the problem as you see it to that person. Okay? If the person indeed sees your vision, what they will see is an expression of your limiting beliefs, the stuff from within you, from your life experiences and your interpretation of the situation, that are leading to this imaginary blockade, that are leading to you being less than efficient, less effective, and in the end, in a bit of a negative emotional state, a less resourceful, less empowered state as you're solving this problem. Someone who you trust to that level, who sees the same vision and who's motivated to think towards the same vision, when they hear what you're doing now, immediately what they'll see is not something critical of you, but what they'll see is a set of steps that you're taking. And if they throw up the vision model in their own mind, what you're using is their brain's natural tendency to resolve cognitive dissonance. Okay? So you just piggybacked off someone's brain to solve that problem. Fantastic. Part 2. If this person is effective at communicating, the signal they send to you doesn't beat you down, discourage, distract you, positive or negative. It keeps you in the state of mind of solving the specific problem. It also, in expressing it to them, what you end up doing is eliminating the aspects of the problem that don't exist. As you're talking, you'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds stupid. And you laugh at yourself because, again, you're talking to someone who actually believes in your vision, 1. 2, wants to see you accomplish that vision. 3, has the skills and the understanding of your method of signaling to the point where they're reflecting what you're communicating to them about the problem from a slightly different perspective and from a lower stress point. Okay? So when you hear the feedback from them, your next task is to step out of ego and take in the model that they just gave you, the perspective that they just gave you, and think about it in an emotional way. Does it feel like it relieves that overwhelmed state? And this is sometimes it takes some slow thinking through it. If you truly are looking to solve these problems, if it feels like it solves the overwhelmed state, either by giving you perspective on what you're doing wrong, providing the reassurance so that you feel like empowered, energized, encouraged. You feel less alone. You notice that your energy is low. You notice that you've been doing something silly like not sleeping enough, that you haven't eaten since earlier, that this is around the time of day when you get a little bitey anyway. So all those elements are perspectives that can be provided from an outside view looking in through a trusted person who shares your vision. Okay? So that's the real solution. Now, in order to be able to receive that solution, there's some work you have to have done in your mind as well. Okay, you got to know what you want first of all, and a lot of us don't really know what we want. Like big picture, what we want enough to drop all the other things that we don't want, to drop all the other things that other people want for us, to drop the things that we said we wanted at one point and regret as soon as the words came out of our mouth, or as soon as we started getting a look at what it really is, we're like, not so much. Okay? Because when you're not motivated towards something and you don't want it, then you're not going to be, your brain, it's called motivated cognition. On a subconscious level, your brain works on an approach or an avoid basis. Okay? That means that when you think of an idea, and that idea in this case can be the solution to a problem, or when you vision an outcome, if it's something you don't want, your brain is going to self-sabotage all the way there as a mechanism of self-defense. On the surface, you'll be able to say you made a good effort because you did all the things on the surface. Everything I saw, everything I could think of, I gave it a good college try. Sure. If you don't want it, then you're going to end up in that negative state, and it's going to, you're going, after a while, you're going to get that frustration. You're going to feel out of integrity. You're going to communicate funny. You're going to hear the feedback as taking jabs at your attitude, your motivation. We interpret things differently when we feel as if our surface signal, we're not miscommunicating because it feels disingenuous. Return to sender. I love that. So when we feel as if we are being inauthentic in our gestures, in our actions, in our words, in our posture, even in those in being included in a group that either is going somewhere where we don't want to go, or being in a group that is going where we want to go, but operating on principles and values that are not in alignment with ours. So we're kind of like, closing our eyes, holding our nose because we know the reward is going to be that good. Okay. So, having done the internal work of deciding what you really want is one layer. Layer two, having done the internal work of knowing what your strengths are, what you like to do. Because here's the thing, if you don't like to do something, every time you're doing it, you're churning way more emotional energy than physical energy. You're churning emotional energy sitting in a bath of cortisol for the hours that you're procrastinating. You're churning a bunch of energy as you're telling yourself the resentful story of what you'd rather be doing instead. You're churning energy as you're blaming whoever's fault it is that whoever you prefer to imagine's fault it is that they didn't do it, so now you're stuck doing it, or that they didn't do it earlier. Or you might be turning this energy, this negativity inwards and beating yourself up for not having done it. But the bottom line is, it's something you don't like to do. It's predisposed to, that negative set of feelings. Some type of way, yeah. You feel some type, and the beauty of that phrase, some type of way, is that our deepest, most visceral, sometimes the feelings that we can't resolve, it's some type of way, because it's someone like, when you put a label on an emotion, you know what to do next. If I'm angry, I know I'm looking at whether to throat punch you or chest punch you or whatever. Not that I'm a violent person. I'm just using that metaphor to help you visualize the dynamics of that situation. Okay, so if I'm sad, I'm looking to have either withdraw and mourn the loss, or withdraw, but send out a signal to pull people to know to come find me in this private space of healing. You know, if I'm proud, I want as many people as possible to be present during that pride, during that moment of pride. Okay, so each of these emotional states is going to result in a certain amount of productivity. If you don't like doing something, you're already going to be leaning towards these negative states. The stories are already primed. You worked yourself up to that negative state on the way. So you got to decide what you want to do. And we're talking about careers here, and we're grown folks. So if you hate your job, then you get to that point where you got to start doing that deep search of how much do I hate it? How much pain am I in now? What am I willing to do to change that? How will I change myself? How will I change my daily actions so that at some point down the line in the foreseeable future, this doesn't exist like that anymore? That's one of the key elements of that overwhelm. If you're working at half engine because the other half is busy either being angry at the situation, resenting it, not believing they're gonna pay you what they should be paying you, not believing they pay you enough, wondering how much longer you're gonna be able to tolerate this job, wondering how much cold water you gotta drink so you don't wrangulate this dude and get fired. Chris said my boss is a real SOB. Parentheses, I'm self-employed. Well played, Dr. V. So, these are all background elements that we don't think about as setting up this bubbling brew to tip you into overwhelm. When you're in those negative states, you got that cortisol running, that low-grade inflammation. You're not fully engaged. You're not fully immersed. You're kind of half in there, which means everything else sounds more interesting. And if you're in a negative state and you're forcing yourself to focus, you know that if you get distracted, it's going to be hell to go back to focus. So you're extra mad when someone comes up with something good or bad because you're like, man, do you know how much it took me to get out of that inertia, to get started on this project? Do you know how long it took me with this slow, boring grind to put this mental model together to start solving the problem? And here you come startling me into oblivion. So when you're in that state, what happens is when you're startled out of a current state, you have a negative energy. Again, we talked about this earlier. This is where you're frustrated. You put that memory away. You put it away not in a super organized way. You don't really have a sense of how important, how far along you are when you kind of temporarily close the book. You don't create that emotional bookmark in the task. So now you turn to this other new task. Someone is talking a mile a minute at you with it, or it's big bold letters, due by end of day today, deadline coming at you. Everything in that task is screaming into your consciousness with that full urgency. And that urgency, unless you're able to compartmentalize it, to again return to that state in between, that breathing state where you're thinking about one thing, body signals. Until you're able to return to that state and cleanse your palate, you're going to go between these two thoughts, and then you're going to do the thing again. You're going to end up with this cluster F of ideas that you have a negative emotion towards. It's a big old pile of work. Okay? So again, instead, we go to that center state after we've been interrupted. This is where self-trust kicks in, by the way. You trust yourself to be able to pull back up that old memory. And by old, I mean 2 minutes ago before this fool came in and interrupted your flow. Okay? You trust yourself to be able to pull up that old memory. And if you don't pull it up, you trust yourself to not die from it. If it was that important, it's going to come back up. The environment's going to cue it. Increasingly, as you trust yourself more, you take notes in different ways and you think about stuff differently. Either way, you trust yourself enough when the interruption shows up to stay in the moment and gather the information to create a meaningful conclusion about what this new event means to you, really. Is the fire now? Is this a run, duck, hide type of situation? Is this an immediate argument? Is this something on the table for later? Is this something where I can tell the person come back later? And another thing is you don't want to make commitment decisions while you're between those two lanes, and this is where you tell someone, hey, let me get back to you. I just need to check a few things. Anyone who doesn't ride with that, you really need to work with them less. That's just the reality of it. Okay, this is psychic boundary type stuff. If someone doesn't honor your boundaries and the need to actually process and make a good, respectable decision before you commit, so you can honor that commitment, then that there's a different dynamic issue there. But anyway, so at that point, you take in the information and you can make a bit of an emotional assessment, but you return to that blank state and you return to what was I doing before the interruption? How is that connected to my goal? And sometimes you don't even have to go super high level life goal, deathbed meditation. Sometimes you could just be like, okay, my goal was by the end of the day to have these intentions done. Okay? And part of what I coach my people to do is to set specific measurable intentions so that you can praise yourself and so that you can measure when you're off target. Now, this element coming into your mental space is what's called a distraction. And as such, you use what's called a distraction intention. If Fred comes up with some important stuff to do, then I will tell Fred, come back after lunch. You decide after certain things come through and interrupt your thinking all the time. You create a mini habit. Here comes Fred down the hall, and you start to feel the anger in your chest because you know what he always does. You know what he's always going to do, so save yourself the energy of the anger in the moment. The anger is getting all over whatever's on your mind right there, and it's making Fred into a more powerful trigger. So, see Fred, go into your neutral breathing state. Don't pull up any more stories or any anger or negative emotion, expectation. Don't pull up anything. You wrap up whatever you're doing, put a bookmark in it. Okay? I am on page 48 of 50 of this document that needs to be done by 5 o'clock because I have my son's basketball game at 6. The pace I was working at, I was expecting to get done at 4:45 with a couple bathroom breaks, and I was going to go grab some snacks downstairs because they got the new gummy bears I like. All of that emotion is in your present state. You're doing all that. That's the real story. If you have your story clear, one thing you're working on. If you're working on 3 things, then all 3 of those things are kind of juggled in the air. You're going to lose all 3 when someone interrupts you. It's just the way it works. Sorry. You got to be working on that one high priority task so that you know it is the most important thing for your day that you can be working on right now. Now, interruption shows up. The first question is the interruption important enough so that I need to displace my number one task that I'm working on, single task? If it's not, then the next question, now remember, you've done the cleansed palate, you've taken a couple breathers and you switch lanes, so you're not just overall angry about the universe and the way the earth is tilted, okay? So that top task, that new task, where does it feed within? And Jeff is super into biofeedback. So Jeff is like, yeah, biofeedback. Yeah, because psychophysiologically, when you're thinking about different things, your entire system goes into different what they call representational states. Your heartbeat, EEGs, muscle tension in your neck, clenching your jaw, all those elements go through micro vacillations, little different level changes based on what you're thinking about in the moment. So this is why it's super handy to think about one thing at a time, so you are sending your body one signal. Okay? So if the new item is less important than the item you're working on right now, then the task then and there is to look at the priorities, the other stuff you have on your list, because you do prioritize your list every day, right? Yeah, we all do. So is this new item more important than item 2? And the whole time you're thinking about the deadline, you're thinking about the consequences of all these items. Because often we'll look at each item and we just look at the front end, pick up the pizza after our work. Now, when you think of each item, you want to develop the clarity of mind where you're able to run through what that item means to you. Don't pick up the pizza. What will happen? I don't pick up the pizza. Call wife to pick up pizza. Wife not thrilled because this is the 3rd time I asked her to pick up the pizza. Now keep in mind, guys, this is a simulation. Don't get super angry, upset where you can't get back to focusing. These are simulations. You got to be able to pull up one thought at a time Dip a toe in the flavor of the emotion of that thought. Experience a little bit of it, like peek in the envelope, open the envelope a little bit, then close it. Because it's these are all in your mind. These are emotional states. Okay? So you look to see what other items are on the list by priority. They should be prioritized. And this is not a guilt should. This is a healthy should, by the way. And Dr. V says Domino's delivers. Yeah. When in doubt, solve those problems, with the alternative solution. Exactly. So each item should have an emotional valence. Okay? That means when you think about each item, what you want to think about is what happens if that item goes badly. Okay? If one item is an argument, then what can I do? Can I call up, negotiate it? Hey dear, can you pick up this pizza this one time? I messed up. I'm sorry. Click, hang up, replace the new item with stay 15 minutes later to finish up the new item, shift some stuff down on the list, put it where it belongs in that list, and take the pain for not having done item 4. Okay? So, and again, I'm non-linear, so I'm visualizing this and I'm trying to paint it. Yeah, I see you, Dr. V. So what you're doing is you have this list in your mind. That list has to be linear in order for you. And it has to be pre-decision linear. Hold on, I got somebody driving by in a truck. Okay, so it has to be pre-situation linear, where at some point in time you took the time to think of each item and you thought about the consequences, and not in some weird abstract cataclysmic way. If not picking up pizza is not divorce, unless you know that it is the straw that's going to break the camel's back, because it's not the only thing you've not done this week or this month or this relationship. Okay? So each item should be ranked not by how much you enjoy doing it, but should be ranked on how much you either enjoy the outcome or how much you don't enjoy the outcome, and as such want to do it to avoid that. And again, when you are thinking one item at a time, there's this there's a couple theories: theory of planned action, theory of elaboration likelihood. The more you like an outcome for something, or the more you believe in the reason for it, the more you believe in the outcome that step is connected to, the more deeply you'll think about it. A lot of us experience it as obsessing over something. So for example, when you meet someone and you have an infatuation, you think about them all the time. And initially it's sort of a silly, geeky loop, but eventually you elaborate it. That's what we do with things we like. So ideally, this goes back to what I said earlier. Do you want the outcome of whatever you're working on? Or do you really, really not want the outcome of not doing whatever you're working on? Now, you should have that prioritized list in place so that each item has a little bit of feeling to it. You look at item number 4 and you shudder a little bit. Oh, yeah, I gotta do that because I'm not trying to deal with the consequences of that bad boy. Okay? Or item number 2, super high priority, because if I keep doing item number 2 every day, I'm 3 days away from that promotion as a result of always doing item 2. If item 2 is as simple as walking by your boss's office and accidentally catching them there and saying hi, and no one else talks to the guy, if that's the item you're doing every day and you've grown to like it because you're fond of where it's going to lead you, then when you look at item 2, my daily walk down the hall, it should have a deeper meaning. This is how actions and choices become meaningful, literally. You infuse the meaning in these items. And when you infuse meaning in each of these individual items, when a new item comes up, it doesn't just join and become this pile of overwhelming stuff waiting. It doesn't just become another stressor. It becomes a meaningful choice. Okay? It becomes, I don't want to do that, but I do want the outcome. So going forward, anytime I think about that, I'm going to think about the outcome. I'm going to take it on. I'm going to put it as item number 4 on this list of priorities. And in most cases, you should have your daily list. You should have your weekly list. You should have your long-term lists. All these things should be lists that you enjoy, because these are things you want to have, or things you don't want the consequences badly enough so that you review them. You think about the consequence a little bit. you shudder a little bit and you get a little motivated. This is how meaning works. And meaning is how you overcome overwhelm. Because when you pull up a piece of meaning in your mind, again, you pull up your vision, you pull up your values, you pull up the consequences, you pull up and you visualize yourself in the moment so that it's visceral. If you're doing something to get to the beach at the end of the year, and it's the weekly chunk, weekly, every week, right when your paycheck comes in, and this should be automated, obviously, party line. But if you're the kind of person that likes to manually do the transfer to savings so that you feel like you're participating, every time you get paid, you do your 10% transfer to that separate savings account. When you're doing the transfer to savings, in order to make it meaningful, you have to have the reason in your mind. It has to be saving for that retirement. And you don't want to be thinking of a negative, unhappy retirement. You want to be thinking of how amazing it's going to be so you can enjoy it now. Otherwise, you're going to be bitter about the money you're taking out on yourself. So these, again, are the meaningful choices that allow you to not just lock into overwhelm. Now, I know I've walked through a lot of different steps in this, and I think there's 6 of you guys still hanging out with me. So feel free to send me any questions so I can go back for clarification or dig into any other aspects. As always, you can send me stuff in my inbox. You can send me a direct message to discuss any other aspects of that. So the key thing is when you hear people talking about living in your purpose, that's living in your purpose. They say your purpose will help you stay out of overwhelm, but it requires that you have cultivated a habit of keeping stuff in your mind in a structured framework. And anytime someone hears structured framework, the tendency, because of the way we were taught it with sort of an outside of authority imposing it on us, the tendency is to be like, oh, framework, oh, budget, oh, planning. But the truth of it is that when you're becoming intentional and you're creating these plans and you're visualizing each action in an emotional way, what you do is you infuse that meaning with each step. Then the steps become energetically charging. They load you up. When you're in gym, you're doing that workout with the reminder that you're gonna be fine by summer and live longer to see someone's graduation, to see your grandchildren, etc. This is when people say focus on your why. Every piece should have a why or shouldn't be done. When the person comes up to you with the new piece of information or new request, you got to ask yourself, okay, deathbed, looking back, why will I have done this? Is this a relationship I'm trying to preserve? Is this so I don't get fired from this place? Is this to maintain workship relations? Okay, I'm going to do it for that reason. I'm clear on my reason. Cleanse palette. Put that in storage in my list. I now have it in my list. I do a quick review of my list because you should be reviewing your list of priorities like every day, all day anyway. That's how you stay intentional. Yeah, no, Dr. V, that's exactly right. Overwhelm strikes me as merely an overload of information that floods the brain. Correct? Yeah, Dr. V. It's purpose of brain is to filter based on salience as an importance of the event in the environment, and based off that filter, selectively let things in. This is selective attention. This is selective memory. Overload and overwhelm happens when your memory is not selective. What leads to the memory not being selective? In the moment, like here and now, not having your intentions stored in a meaningful, accessible way. Intentions are the most accessible memories in our minds. So intentions are triggered by environment and triggered by situation. So you can hook your intentions to your thought process as you wish. So you can say to yourself, okay, my intention is when I get distracted to remember my intentions. It's weird recursive programming, but it works. So intentions are accessible. When someone comes up and interrupts me from my tasks, if then and when then are the framings that our brains subconsciously recognize. If this, then this. And in habit setting, it's cue, response, reward. And so you have the cue, which is the thing that happens. If such and such, then I will do such and such. Okay? Yeah, Dr. V says, I remember schizophrenics have poor filtering of incoming information and inappropriate expressions as well. Yeah, and that's dopamine mediated. The inappropriate, the filtering of information, yeah, and the expression, they're both dopaminergic phenomena. Get my psychiatry flashbacks. So what happens is two things. When you get in the habit of repeating this intention list to yourself, the list stays accessible in memory, and your brain repeats it on autopilot in the background. He or she is going to want me to remember that list, so I might as well keep it accessible. Your subconscious works for you. And as such, if it knows that around noon every day, you're going to pull up this list, it's going to have the list accessible. It's going to make it easier for you to pull it up. If it knows that when someone interrupts you, you've set the intention that you're going to go through these steps, it's going to take practice. The first few times someone interrupts you, you're going to blurt awful words at them. That's what's going to happen. You're going to catch yourself doing that. You're going to use regret. Regret is the emotion that is most effective at triggering, rewriting past memories, as well as creating improved, more adaptive prospective memories in the future. These are memories, intentional memories. So you're going to make mistakes through the whole process. Harness regret. Don't harness shame. Don't harness guilt. Don't pull up big, long, complex stories. Stay in that non-evaluative feedback with yourself. What went wrong? What went right? Keep what went right. Evaluate what went wrong for either elimination or for adjusting that step such that it's more effective at getting you towards that higher goal. If the goal has many steps, then it should be broken down into sub-steps that when you think of the bigger goal, your brain, we do chunking, where when you focus on one thing, if you focus on a shoe, your brain will then start to notice shoelace, the sole, the Nike emblem, the color, etc. So your brain works like that with all concepts, and you want your intentions to be stacked like that. Imagine them like Russian nesting dolls. Okay? So you have this list of intentions. These intentions are prioritized. Each intention has this whole architecture inside of it that when you turn to it and zoom in on that one, you can zoom in. When you zoom in, you can unfold it. When you unfold it, there are emotions in there. When you elaborate it, you can reach in there. You can change that memory. You can learn. You can use whatever present moment as an opportunity to update that intention to make it more effective, make it more efficient, make it as streamlined as possible. And that's how you end up updating these habits where you're learning ridiculously faster than most people, because you're not wasting the energy with those detours. So that's the structure of managing overwhelm. Hopefully that's more useful than what you'll find on a lot of these pop psychology sites, because it's a process. It's a specific process that you use to get stuff done in a chaotic world. Because you're not going to get to do a hard reset of your brain, of your life. It's a decision at some point in time that going forward, I'm going to start using this framework. And here's the thing. Obviously, I pitch my own framework because that's what I coach in and that's what I love. This framework that has worked for me. But what's most important is to have the insight to realize when certain aspects of a framework don't work for you, and of course have the patience and awareness and presence to adjust it so that either it works for you or to go find another person who thinks differently and to find a framework that deep inside works for you. Because if your brain knows that the framework will work for you, then your brain develops the curiosity again with imagining yourself as that stronger, smarter, more efficient, more powerful, more effective, more successful person. Okay? Nichelle says, awesome talk, perfect for a family road trip, and seriously right on time. Can you say happy birthday, Rochelle? Of course I can. Happy birthday, Rochelle. Is it Rochelle or Rachel? I don't want to be butchering. Dr. Reese says, I like lollipop psychology. It's sweet and neat and a real emotional treat. Thank you for that. Okay, so I think those are the core concepts around the overwhelm idea. The reason I dig into these ideas more deeply is because each one has nooks and crannies, and what we often find happening is we'll go read an article about it, we'll watch a YouTube video about it, and we'll try to make it work, and we end up knocked on our backs and it doesn't work. And the reason is not because you're doing it wrong, but because two things. One, usually the concept has a lot of nooks and crannies in there. And they're going to communicate it to you in a surface area to make it sexy and make it look like it's going to work super fast. That's not how reality works. What you need is a process that is rewarding because it eliminates uncertainty and it is flexible enough to fit in your mind and map to your reality and make meaning. Okay, so increasingly, what you'll find with this approach, and this particular approach to prioritizing, is the standard one. This is the one that in a lot of different places. She's happy. Did I say it right though? Which one was it? Was it Rochelle or Rachel? Because if I said it wrong, she only half is happy, right? So this is the standard abstract framework that has emerged across different tribes. So no matter which tribe you join, when you dig deep enough, what you'll find is that the way to tap into your mind's natural ability to manage tasks is to set a prioritized list of intentions tied to your values, each item on the list having a motive, a reason for being able to step into each individual thought, and Rachel. Good, okay, cool. I think that was the one I said second. Yeah, I love what Jeff said. My intention is to return to my intention, the relaxation response, breath, and breathe. Yeah. So, so if you look at it, what you realize is this is an emotional landscape. This is prefrontal cortex pulling up a thought. Your mind evaluating that thought, and even your amygdala gets to get in on the action too. Because remember, your prefrontal cortex regulates your amygdala. Thanks, Layla. Layla said you inspire. I'm blushing. Purple Manny. So your amygdala, you want your amygdala to get in on the action because that's how you get those little spikes of emotion. Those are delicious. What you don't want is your amygdala to seize and for your brain to flood with cortisol and your prefrontal cortex to shut down and go to sleep. That's hypofrontality. That's learned helplessness. That's resentfulness. That's anger. That's fight, flight, freeze. That's feeling caught in past stories. That's all those things. Dr. V said, just like camping, you got to get intent. Thank you for that. Dr. V with the puns. So what you're looking at is, this is brain architecture turned into process. That's what that is. Okay, so different tribes will put different flavors on it. I like bare knuckle mental models because I like to think through stuff fast. I like emotions to guide me so that when something is wrong, it feels wrong. And you only get that for me, I get that if I get a bare model so that the model only needs me to think about a couple simple things and then I can focus on the problem right in front of me. If the model is super hard to pull into my head, guess what? Someone startles me, the first thing that comes to mind is holding back violence. Again, verbal violence, imaginary violence. I'm not in a productive, creative, receptive, open, friendly, empathic state of mind where my next response when I'm interrupted is going to be, how can I see this mental model that this person is offering me? That's not where I'm going to go with it unless my intention fires off. I'm being interrupted. Let me take the breath. Let me cleanse the palate. As I'm cleansing the palate, what happens is, instead of layering everything, Dr. V said, but don't emotions actually control us and we get to enjoy the illusion that we are in control? Yeah. Well, most of the data I've looked at says that the willpower, conscious will, which is literally the space we're talking about right now, the choice to change states, emotional states. And if you look at the Abraham Hicks law of attraction stuff, it says you change states one at a time to the next highest state that gives you an emotional release. So you don't try to jump from anger right to joy, right to positive expectancy, because that's not how you get to those different states. Each state, I think the model they use is called Hidden Markov model. It's one of those old neural network models. So a state has a set of affordances associated with it. These are a set of actions that you can do, a set of memories you can pull up, places you can go from that state. So your goal is not to bare knuckle pull yourself into certain actions against your will in that state, but to shift states. And to show you how automatic that is, most of us, when we go into work mode, we get the serious face, work, not play, and we go into that state. So emotions work on the same basis, state-based memory. So you don't want to try to shift the pivot by trying to go through actions from a state. You want to shift states and perform from there. Now, that being said, there's a metaphor called sometimes you have to drive with the monsters on the bus. Some folks find that they have a hard time shifting states because when they think of a different state, they're afraid that by shifting states, they'll get demotivated, they'll be disempowered. Sometimes there are some situations where you have someone imposing their values on you in such a way that the noise and uncertainty of being in that relationship with them in the moment makes you feel as if you let go of your position, they're going to push you into a negative state. So again, this is where the practice of pulling to the breathing state, or really getting to know yourself, whether you're not going to be able to re-equilibrate to full baseline and you need to just move from a bit of a calm state and again pull up your values. Now, one quick thing is that often some folks who haven't learned to go through that clean palette state to return to baseline, what they do is you'll know these are people who are successful, but they do it for the haters. They do it to prove people wrong. They do it because they have this constant voice in their minds that's telling them they're not good enough, and they're running away from that. They're fighting their demons as opposed to hitting that state of equanimity. They call it self-alienation. When you take in outside values and outside rules to the point where instead of pulling up your values, your vision, and your outcome, you end up burning a lot of energy doing what they tell you, what whoever is telling you not to do. And where that's frustrating is that you'll do that, and the initial rush, the initial pleasure of, great phrase, clear palate state. Yeah, that's how I imagine it. It's the clear palate state. It's the deep breathing. It's that parasympathetic state that you can return to, where you let go of the stories, you return to the breathing, you focus on that one thing, and it's practiced. Because after you practice it for a while in different situations, you get to where you can do it in more intense situations. But if you don't return to that state and pull up your values, then the next answer is basically to jump into a triggered state, into a fight, flight, freeze, faint state. And that's when you jump into a role, your working memory gets locked up, and you go into identity defense. You go into a bit of a threat mode. You're doing things to prove a point as opposed to as a creative, expressive approach to solving the problem in the moment based on what is currently really available, the abundance of our reality, and the wide amount of opportunities that will manifest if you take the time to pull back from what the emotion is constraining you to do. What the ego, what pride, what shame, what guilt, whatever negative emotion state is dictating are the only choices available. So now I could rabbit hole this stuff, so I won't dive back in because cover me, I'm going in. I get into it, and to me, it's all it's a tapestry. It's all these different concepts are connected together, and based on what happens in the moment in the environment, certain concepts are activated in your mind. They become prominent. Associated nearby concepts get activated as well. And you're able to make choices based on the emotional state that you've associated with these individual concepts. Overwhelm happens when something happens in your environment and the brain says, forget the whole thing. It just goes angry. So that's the overwhelm state. So hopefully this conversation has provided you with the resources to identify and let's see. Sorry, I was reading a message that just came in. One of my side note, one of the habits I'm cultivating is immediately assessing and basically doing what I just told you guys. When I have a message come in, I do a quick shift in state where I put away what I'm doing so I can reach it again in a neutral emotion, and then I evaluate what came up. So I was checking this message and then returning to you guys. So and then I went in three different conversations. So so there. So hopefully I provided you guys with not just the standard party line, do these things, prioritize your list, return to your values, get a broader view, pull up your vision, important versus urgent. These are all buzzwords. The first few times you do it, it's going to be awful. You're going to get 2 steps in and you're going to be like, oh, I messed up. Go back in, try again, step through it, try the different parts, do it in less stressful situations, do it in lower stakes situations, because really what you're looking to do is to train your working memory, train your prefrontal cortex, so that when environmental triggers come in, you remain intentional, you remain on your path, you remain headed towards your desired outcome. So hopefully the data I provided is conducive to developing practices that lead you to that. If you'd like someone to help you in implementing that, as always, I have 2 programs now. I have my one-to-one coaching, where I step you through a framework that is customized to your thought processes and helps you connect these time-tried approaches that successful people have used to get what they want done. And I can walk you through that. I have the one-to-one coaching I do. I have a 12-week program. I call that Cognitive Program Restructuring, CPR for short. Clever, huh? And then my other program, which I just recently launched, is my group coaching, which some people enjoy because that allows you to learn, and that's an 8-week group coaching. I have one starting in the next couple of weeks. Lower price point, more affordable to jump into these ideas. And each week we step into one of these core fundamental ideas. We take some time to see how it applies to your reality and how to embed it in your thought process so you can use these in the moment. So those are the 2 programs I have available if you'd like some help implementing these frameworks and approaches, tools, tips, and ideas in your own life. So thanks for joining me, spending the time looking into overwhelm with me. Dr. Manny, I'm out.